Hey there, I'm Amy Connell. Welcome to Graced Health, the podcast for women who want simple and grace-filled ways to take care of themselves and enjoy a little chocolate. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach who wants you to know your eating, movement, and body don't need to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you're called to do. Now, I have to be totally honest. This episode has nothing to do with eating and movement and body, but I think it does have something to do with doing what you are called to do. So this is a bonus episode with I have a lot of adjectives for you, Krystal. My friend, my podcast mentor, my educator on all things podcast, Krystal Proffitt. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Krystal. She is a content strategist, coach, and host of the award-winning show, the Proffitt Podcast. She specializes in helping content creators create with confidence. Krystal teaches content strategy, repurposing, branding, and marketing through her podcast, digital courses, and YouTube channel. It is a lot, you guys. She's everywhere. Dedicated to content creation, she also appears as a content expert on other YouTube channels such as Buzzsprout and Streamyard. Krystal, welcome.
I am so grateful for your smile, our relationship. I'm trying to remember a time when we weren't like Facebook Messenger buddies because it makes my heart so happy whenever I get a ping from Amy because I know we're going to talk about podcasting and we're going to talk about we're just going to geek out together. And I am just so grateful to be here because this is so fun. So thank you for having me.
And see, you are in this podcasting world, but I'm a podcaster, but I'm not like in the education part. It is hard to find other people to geek out with. So you're just stuck with me, Krystal.
It's
I
fine.
adore you. You're great. You teach such wonderful things. And even though you and I teach things, two totally different things, I think the heart behind it is very similar. And that is to help people do what they feel like they need to be doing and get the message out. So I wanted to have you on today because I have people reach out to me all the time and they're like, how do I start a podcast? And I say, number one, you need to listen to the Proffitt Podcast. And you have a lot of other channels that we're going to let you tell people about. And then of course, I tell them about Buzzsprout, which you work hand in hand with Buzzsprout, and they're kind of the back end hosting for this. And you have made this incredible accomplishment, Krystal. I think it's now over 1,200 podcast episodes.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. I'm like, it sounds so wild when people say it back to me because when I type it, it sounds wild. Like I was recording an episode recently and I was typing it and I was looking and I was like, wait, is that right? Like, is that actually right? So to hear you say it, I'm like, yeah, it's very wild. It's so crazy.
It's wild. It totally is. And I think you've learned a few things in those
Yes.
1,200 episodes,
Yes.
specifically as a content creator. So I wanted to have you on and I wanted to just set this up differently than I normally do. Often I will have questions and I'll kind of try to start telling a story with the questions that we're doing. But for this, I thought it would be interesting for you to share 5, and we can just look, there's no rules here. So give or take 5-ish, take lessons that you have learned in producing these 1,200 episodes, and specifically through the lens of someone who is wanting to do this and get started. Like,
Yeah.
where do we even start? Because what you would tell me might be some different than you would tell someone who's getting started. So I'm just going to start there and open up the floor and say, can you share one? It doesn't have to be the biggest one, but like one lesson that you have learned.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I know people are listening right now are probably in a season of their life that they know, okay, this is a new season for me. Maybe it's a season you've been in for a while and things are going to change. And so when I think about podcasting and content creation, I always think about the seasonality of it in that you're going to have ebbs and flows. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have a time when you're really busy. And then you're going to have times when it's Christmas break and you're like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to look at a podcast show note. I don't want to look at any. So I look at, I mean, this would be my first tip is give yourself grace, which I love the name of this podcast. I mean, hello, it works so well with this, but give yourself grace and allow for it to work into your life. So I tell people this often, if you don't plan for your podcast, then it's going to try to plan you and it's not going to work out really well because I see this a lot, especially, you mentioned I'm really like, I am entrenched, I'm in deep with podcasters, influencers, YouTubers, and I see burnout left and right. I mean, and Amy, I know that you'll appreciate this, like from the health perspective of taking care of yourself. You can't run a sprint, or you can't run, how do I say this? You can't run a marathon as you're sprinting. Like it's not going to work. You cannot expect to sprint from mile 1 to mile 26.2 and make it the full way through a marathon. You have to pace yourself. And the way that that works well for me, and I know Amy, you do this well too, is I work with what's going on in my life. I'm a mom of 3 boys. Amy and I, we have this in common and we share our little notes back and forth. Your boys are older than mine and you're like, "Oh, one day it'll happen. They'll all be 6 foot, like they're huge and they're towering over you." And I'm in the season of life where I have middle schoolers and elementary kids. And so I just look at.
And you have basketball games all
Yes.
day, every Saturday during
Oh
basketball
my
season.
gosh. Exactly. And so I look at this is the season of life that I'm in. And I don't resist against that. I just accept it and I settle into it. And I say, you know what? If we have practice on Tuesday nights from 6 to 7 or 6 to 9, depending on if all the kids have practice, then I say, okay, well, that might be whenever I'm going to plan some podcast episodes instead of just sitting on my phone and scrolling Instagram, or I'm going to look at a few ideas that I could try. So that's just my biggest takeaway from 1,000+ episodes is I've always looked at content as how can I fit this into my life and my schedule? And that's really, I believe, the key to how I've been able to sustain this much content over a period of 5-ish years and not get burned out, not hit that health wall of this is too much. I can't do this. I'm exhausted. I'm burned out. And unfortunately, I just see it too often. So I hope that that's a big takeaway for everybody is just when you're thinking about starting something new, whatever it is, how can you work it into your natural skills and abilities and the season of your life, maybe with yourself, maybe with your family, or maybe you're single and you're like, this is my time to hit the ground running. Like just take all of those things into consideration.
I totally agree. You've said so many things that number one parallel things that I say when you're starting out on a health journey.
Yeah.
Because the number one thing that I hate is when January comes and people are like, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week and I'm reducing my calories. And it's just all the things. I think this is a short fuse and you're going to fizzle out so quickly. So definitely a lot of parallels there. And I agree with all of it. What's interesting as you were talking, we do have seasonality of things. One difference that you and I have done is you have stayed consistent. You show up for your audience every single week. And I know, because I know how this works and because you talk about it, you're very transparent on your podcast. But I know that's because you will batch produce, you do things ahead of time. You're not sitting there recording on a Monday night before it goes live on Tuesday.
Right. Yeah.
On the other hand, I will intermittently take some time because I just have to do that because for me, if I'm taking time off, that means I need it.
Yeah.
And it's only going to burn out my fuse even more if I work to get a month or however long of episodes. So, I really admire what you're able to do. And I just am not, that's just not what I can do.
Yeah.
So, I think it's important for people to know that there's more than one way of doing it, but you're right.
And that's such a great point too, because getting into that idea of burnout and like just taking care of yourself, I think that that should be the main theme. I mean, I know it's the theme of your podcast, but even bringing that into today's episode, which is very different for your audience, I think that we can still have that at the center is you can't compromise your health and your lifestyle to try to create something, whether it's a podcast, it's a business, it's a side hustle, like anything that you're thinking about going on a new journey. If you get into it and you're like, oh, well, it's okay. I just have to lose 2 hours of sleep to do this, but it'll be worth it. Or I just have to work and ignore my family because it's just what I have to do in this season. Like there's so many different levels of burnout. And I think that, for everybody, it's going to look different. I mean, I was on a different podcast today. I was on an interview and somebody was talking about how much content I produced today. And I was like, oh, no. You weren't here for 2021. 2021 was the year that like, I look back and I'm like, that was insanity. What in the world were you even doing? I was producing so much content at scale, at volume. And people are like, how did you do that? And I look back, I'm like, I honestly don't know. I think it was a lot of coffee. I think that there was a lot of just, like piecing things together, but I was inching closer to burnout. And that's when I said, you know what? We got to change things. And so just understanding, giving yourself that grace, not having this, well, Amy does her podcast this way, so maybe I could try to do a podcast. Like, don't have that comparison. Look at it from the seasonality of your life and what you're actually capable of doing, and just be okay with it ebbing and flowing along the way. Because I mean, Amy knows I've changed my podcast. I can't even count how many times at this point. I've changed the name of it. I've changed the cadence of how often I publish. I've changed long episodes, short episodes, guests, not guests, bonus. Like I've done so many things over 1,000 episodes. And I think it's just all about not being so rigid with how things should be and just giving yourself that grace. So that's the underlying theme of this. No pun intended. The grace. Give yourself grace.
Give yourself some grace. I have a lot more notes that go beyond that, but okay, we'll take that as the first one.
Yes.
Okay. What is the second one?
Yeah. So that was really the big one, is like grace, being authentic and being yourself. The second point is really allowing mistakes to happen. So Amy, actually, I want to throw this back to you real fast, just because you've been in your podcasting journey for a while. Like, is there like one big mistake that sticks out to you? Because I know my big mistake, then I'll share that. But I'm just curious if you have something that immediately comes to mind with your podcast and making a mistake.
Well, you're totally putting me on the spot here. I think the biggest mistake that I have made is just thinking, well, this is how it's going to be. And when you mentioned it earlier, I've been a student of other podcasters. Mm-hmm. And so I get on there and I listen and I take note, because once you kind of understand how the sausage is made, you start to learn and you start to study. And then I think, well, this is how this needs to be. That's how I need to be. Yeah. Well, they have a team of people.
Yes.
They have, I'm learning to say, like, I'm not a team of one, because I have my children behind me. I have my husband behind me. I'm like, but in terms of the day-to-day stuff, like it's me. And then I have one girl who helps me with a few reels. So I think the big mistake is thinking that I have to do it exactly like someone else I have been learning from. Learning is helpful, but I have to apply it in a way that it works for me. And so I have definitely changed, and I've thrown some spaghetti at the wall. Some of it's stuck and some of it has just flopped down.
Yeah. Yeah. I love hearing that. So I wanted to really just ground the conversation in mistakes happen for everybody. So I didn't want to share a bunch of examples from someone that's done 1,000 episodes. Like, it literally happens to every single content creator. I mean, again, going back to your health journey, like I'm sure there was mistakes along the way, whether it was, a dietary like choice that you wanted to make. And you're like, oh my gosh, that was terrible for my energy. It did not work for me, or it messed up my metabolism, or this happened. Like there's so many variations that go into a journey. But I think if you go into a content journey specifically with the mindset that you're going to be perfect from the beginning, or you're not going to make any mistakes, that's setting yourself up for failure. So I always tell everybody, just embrace it. I make mistakes to this day constantly,
Yeah.
constantly. Now, people in my audience may not see it because I can edit it out, or I can do some fancy things with technology that make it less, very prominent. But the thing is that I embraced mistakes a long time ago. And that actually helped me be more relatable to my audience, because I'm not creating and sharing from a space that, hey, you lowly folks down there, I'm better than you and you have something to learn from me, the expert. No, no, no.
Oh no, you are not that way.
I'm not that way at all. I pull back the curtain and I say, oh my gosh, this is where I screwed up recently. And this is like, let me just tell you all these things, because I like teaching from that perspective of, look, I made all of these mistakes, so you don't have to. It actually, I love teaching from this place, because again, it shows that perfection is an illusion. It's not attainable anyway. So let's not shoot for that as a goal. Let's go in. Yes, you're going to try to do your best. Hopefully you're going to make fewer mistakes as you go along your journey, but you're going to learn from every single one of them and get better over time. So that's like lesson number 2 is mistakes happen for everyone. And so just embrace that and learn how to move through them just faster and quicker, and maybe with a little less pain every single time.
Oh, totally agree. I know you use Hindenburg, and I do too, which is an audio editing software. And it's one of the, in my opinion, it's one of the few things that if people are like ready to spend a little bit of money on a few things podcast related, I'm like, I think this is worth the money. I haven't gotten the Pro yet, or the whatever the next version is. I haven't done that. But on Hindenburg, you can mute different tracks. So I know you know this, but I want people to visualize, like, I will have the intro music, and then there's another track that has me like talking in an intro. And then there's another track that will have Krystal's voice, and another track that'll have my voice. And so when I'm going through editing, I will mute those tracks so that way I can just listen to Krystal's voice, or just listen to something else, or see how things blend in. And I can't tell you how many times I have uploaded. Well, I say that a couple times I have uploaded on Hindenburg, published to Buzzsprout with it muted. And so it stays muted when it goes to Buzzsprout. And I tell you what, it's so funny, because I think every time it's been such a God thing, because for some reason, and I know for some reason why, I know what the reason is why, but I'm like, I'm just going to listen to this on Buzzsprout and make sure that it came through okay. And then like, it's totally missing something. I'm like, so I got to go and republish it and all of that kind of stuff. But little things like that, and you learn. And so now, before I hit publish, publishing from Hindenburg, I'm going through and making sure that none of those little mute buttons are highlighted or whatever, or muted, whatever you call it.
Well, and I just want to throw out another one, because I said, I've made some really big mistakes. The top one that always comes to mind, and Amy, I've probably shared this with you 1,000 times, but I recorded my very first episode. My mic wasn't even plugged in. It was not even plugged in. Oh my gosh. Like, I did this whole thing. She must have heard me, because I'm thinking back to how my setup was. And I had an all-in-one computer that I'm sure had a built-in mic somewhere on it. And I'm just like, I don't even understand how she heard me. Like, how did she not say, Krystal, I can barely, this is not working. I'm sure she was like, well, she knows what she's doing. She's starting this podcast. Like, I'm not going to comment on it, but I didn't even have my microphone plugged in on my very first podcast episode. Okay. Like, I mean, and here I am. Like, you can come back from anything. Like, I'm living proof of that. So don't be afraid of mistakes.
Yes, I forgot to hit record when I was doing this on Zoom, and Jenna Unke, who's a physician's assistant, was so gracious and took time out of another lunch hour and came back, and we re-recorded. So, I mean, we could go on and on about that. I know, but you are absolutely right. Mistakes happen for sure. See, once we got going, I was like, oh yeah, now I remember that. And I remember that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. What is your third lesson in that you have learned in over 1,000 podcast episodes?
Yes. So this is specifically for podcasters, but I think that we can kind of tailor that to your entire audience. But don't be afraid to talk to yourself. And now I know Amy can really relate to this one, having solo podcast and having just created content where you're in a room by yourself and it is just you and a microphone, or just you and a camera. It is so awkward. And I think that people have, especially the younger generation, right? Like all the influencers, it feels like everybody was born with a phone in their hand and everybody knows how to take a selfie and everyone knows how to do this. And everyone, I'm like, I didn't learn any of this stuff. Okay. Like I heard the other day, I actually had an interview with someone and she was saying that she was a very high, like, executive in her company. And she was like, oh yeah, I had, in my high school, I did this, really awesome Facebook campaign and it led into this. I was like, hang on, you had Facebook in high school? Hey, and it made me feel so old. I'm not gonna lie. I felt so old. I was like, okay, first of all, like I know that there's an age gap in here somewhere because the people I'm talking to have now, like, they had Facebook in high school. I'm officially old. But I think that there's this misconception that no matter where you fall in the age range, that you're just supposed to pick it up and it's supposed to be natural and easy. And if it's not, then you're a failure. So I went to school for marketing. I have done presentations in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people. I've emceed events. I was a cheerleader all through high school. Like I am the definition of an extrovert, but you put me in a room by myself with just a microphone and things get weird. Things get really awkward. So I want to just throw that out there for anybody that's maybe you've thought about like doing a Facebook Live. I can still remember before Facebook Live was a thing, it was Periscope. And I remember sitting there with my phone. I was shaking. I was like, okay, you just got to hit record. You just got to hit it. Like I was like pumping myself up. Like, okay, maybe I can do some jumping jacks. Like something like I was freaking out internally because I thought, what do you do? This is supposed to be easy. Everyone makes it look so easy. So why is this so hard for me? And so I just want to give you that grace right now. If you're listening to this, that it's awkward, it's hard, but it's like ripping off the Band-Aid. You got to record that first episode or even that first clip. It doesn't even have to be a first episode, or go, do an Instagram story for the first time, like whatever creating something new looks like for you. But you have to just rip that Band-Aid off, because unless you're a trained radio jockey, which is, back in the day, the only way that you would have a quote unquote podcast like platform, no one knows how to do this stuff. So
you're so right.
And let it happen.
It's funny. I find it more awkward when I have people in the house and I'm recording a solo episode. So that's just my experience. Yep. I'm okay. And I think a lot of it is I've gotten used to it, and it's like childbirth, right? Like you kind of forget
yes.
The beginning. But actually I do remember when I first started, I recorded in my closet, which was kind of adjacent to my husband's office. And so I would go in there and record, and I come out and I'm like, did you hear me? And he's like, he's like, it just sounds like,
yeah.
And he's like, and I just imagine you saying sweaty balls.
Like, what are you doing in there? Like, the perception. And then you're thinking that, okay, they heard me say 1,000 times, or they heard me stutter, or I made mistakes. And then like, I'm going to walk out here and they're going to be like judging because they listen to every single thing. No one really cares. I mean, let's be honest. Like no one, or if they do, like they don't even know what you're talking about because they're not your ideal listener. So that's like a great way to segue into the next point is you are talking to your specific audience. So I'm so glad that Amy kind of set up today's interview the way that she did, because her ideal audience is probably not interested in podcasting. There's probably going to be a segment of her audience that's like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting to hear about this. And there's other people that probably turn this episode off. Like, I mean, I know the reality of that is you're not going to be for everybody with every single piece of content, but you have to be willing just to put yourself out there and know that I'm trying to talk to this specific person. I'm not trying to talk to everybody. I am trying to share this important message with the people that need to hear it, because they are the only ones that matter. Not everyone matters, but I'm really trying to talk to this. No. The only people that matter to me is my audience that wants it very straightforward. They want it to be relatable and they want to know that it's doable. So I don't do very complex, complicated things, because I don't want to listen to something that's complex and complicated. I want it to be fun. I want it to be casual, but I also want it to be valuable. And so I look at it as always adding value to your audience and making sure you're speaking to that specific person. So I kind of jumped ahead and I rushed into lesson number 4, but
No, I think that's a really good point. And the other thing too, if they've made it this far, then they're probably interested in podcasting. But you have, I mean, when you were talking earlier about how your podcast has changed, one of the things that you have changed is the type of content that you are helping people create. So it's not just podcasting, it's also YouTube, and it's also like trying to grow an Instagram. I mean, like however that is. And so you're right. I mean, speaking with your specific audience on what they are trying to do. I mean, it's that pain point. It's that, that one word that is used a lot is the avatar. I mean, picture who you're trying to talk to. And I have a picture, and you do too, of, who our ideal listener is. And that doesn't mean it's only going to be that group or that little target, that's red center in the middle of the target. But that is very helpful for sure when you're thinking about like who you're talking to. And I will try to envision a person, that I have created. And I think that's helpful for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. What's your final? Well, I shouldn't say final. What's your 5th? Maybe it's for final. I don't know. Lesson that you would like to pass on today.
Yeah. I think that if anybody, we keep bringing it back to, starting things new, going on a new journey. And one of the things that I wish that someone would have told me at the beginning of my online business journey, podcasting journey, my writing journey, I'm also a writer, is adding story just brings so many more colors into what you're creating. And so, Amy and I today have shared story after story after story from personal examples of our experiences. And those are the things that people really connect with. Like, yeah, I could give you all day, every day, here are the 5 tips, go do this, and keep it very black and white. But at the end of the day, people, and this is my marketing background. So I have a marketing background. Like I say, like, I love podcasting, but marketing is like, that is my true love, is talking about marketing, whether it's podcasting, digital marketing, email marketing, like whatever it is. Marketing at its center is really making those connections, because when you do that, it really just elevates the relationship so much faster with other people. And a great example is, just having these relatable nuggets in my content that people like. I did an episode. I don't even remember when it was. I actually don't even remember saying this, but I had somebody email me and she said, your episode was so valuable. You talked about when you were wrapping presents, rewatching Emily in Paris. And I was like, when did I say that? Like, it was a throwaway in my mind. Like, it wasn't in my outline. It wasn't in my script. It wasn't anywhere in my notes. It was just, I was talking and I thought, oh, what's something that my audience would find funny or interesting? And how can I just bring that in? So I brought it into it because I know how much story grounds everything and connects us all in our humanity. And so adding story to what you're doing. And I know that everybody listening to this podcast has a story. You have a health journey. You have a journey probably with your body. I mean, I know that I do. And I know, Amy wrote an entire book about it. Like, we all have stories that we are either telling ourselves or ones that we want to tell other people, to make sure that we ground conversations, we ground ideas, and we just ground concepts that can help us connect to one another. So wherever you are in your journey, I hope that you can learn how to tell your own story in a way that connects with whoever you're trying to share your message with.
That's a great point. And one of the things that my head goes to when you're talking about that is like going to church and hearing sermons.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I remember. You remember the story, which then helps you remember the message. But it's very rare that like our pastor will have these little bullets on, on the screen, and that can be helpful. And even though I'm somewhat of a visual learner, hearing the story will help me remember the message more so than just that, like you said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
So I think that that's definitely impactful. And then even taking it further, I mean, Jesus taught in stories.
100%. The parables is the only, like, thank God he taught in stories, because, oh my gosh, it just makes it so much more grounded in reality. We can imagine the mustard. Well, I didn't know how big a mustard seed was. And I was like, I don't get this story until I finally saw mustard. I was like, oh, okay. Now I understand, like, the mustard seed and why it's so significant. But until you ground those two things together, it's like, it's very just up to everybody's imagination. And so if you can ground it all into something that's relatable and people can identify, it just really, like, it sends the message home for sure.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay. So I had asked for 5. You gave me 5. Do you have anything else that you want to share before I get to my final questions?
Yes, I actually, while you were talking about it, we had talked earlier, before we started recording, about, you had asked me, if you have anything that is, worthy of sharing, whether it's in a spiritual experience or something. And I just go back to validation. So I've been on this journey. I mean, we didn't get too much into it, but I was a stay-at-home mom, and then I started blogging, and then I got into podcasting, and I've had this, like, real, I mean, looking back, I can connect the dots between everything, but there were so many times that I look back and say, oh yeah, I almost stopped there. I almost quit there. This almost happened and derailed everything. And if I look back to what kept me going, it was the little validating nuggets of, I mean, it was a surrendering, basically, of me saying, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Please help me. Like, give me a sign, right? It's the thing that we all do. It's like, give me a sign that I'm on the right track. It's the prayer of surrender. And I will never forget, I had a coaching client, and her name was Lori, and she shared about, because I was trying to decide, should I do this I'd been podcast coach and all this stuff, and I wasn't making tons of money. I was like, oh, I need to be making lots of money and doing this and doing that. And then Lori came into my world, and I asked her, I was like, well, what's your podcast about? And she said, I help grieving moms who have lost their children. And I mean, talk about, like, I always get choked up when I talk about it, because that was the validation that I needed to keep going. Is like, Krystal, this is so much bigger than you. Like, get out of your own way. I didn't give you this gift to just talk about how incredible you are and put yourself out and say, I'm the best. Look at me. I'm amazing. I'm doing this so you can help other people with the message you have. And so there's this concept called the ripple effect of podcasting. I don't know if it's an actual term. I just kind of made it up one day. There's a podcast episode about it, but Lori is at the center of it, because I started thinking about, if I help this one woman share her message about losing a child and what that meant, and going through the grieving process and understanding how that impacted her life, how many more people, how many more moms and parents, like, how many more families are going to be affected if they know how to deal with grieving and work through that process with a guide. Like, she is their guide. She is their North Star at this point. If they are grasping for any kind of light in their life at that point, I would love to help Lori just figure out how to do the tech and make it happen. Like, it's not rocket science. I mean, we can figure these things out, but having that higher purpose really helps me along my journey. So if you are in any part of your journey right now and you're looking for validation, look for it in those little simple things. Because sometimes for me, it's an email that I'm like, I don't know if I'm on the right track. And then I'll get an email that says, Krystal, this made my day. Sometimes it's somebody listening. Sometimes it's Amy reaching out to me. Like, Amy, you're a godsend some days, whenever it's like, I don't really know what's going on. Like, am I on the right path? And Amy's like, hey, let's talk about this. Like, I want to, this is what I'm thinking about my podcast. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. This is why I'm doing this. It's not about me. It's helping other people in their journey that have a message on their heart to share with other people. And that just really grounds everything for me on a regular basis.
That's a really great point to leave on. Yeah, I wrote down, validation that can be impacting someone totally outside of yourself. It doesn't
Yes.
even need to be that it's you, that it's impacting other people. That's a great
Yeah.
point. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got some questions I ask all my guests.
Okay, let's do
I
this.
love learning about people's tattoos because I have found that when people have a tattoo, often they have a meaning behind it. So I was wondering if you have a tattoo, if you would mind sharing what it is and the meaning behind it. If you don't have one, but you had to get one, what would it be and where would it go?
This is such a great question because the meaning, but like the first thing that comes to mind is regrets. Do we have that? Has that been an answer yet? Because
Yes.
I'm
Oh,
pretty
yes.
sure. Because oh my gosh, Amy, you're calling me out. My parents know about this now, but I was 16. I got one and it was an illegal tattoo. We'll call it that. It was in somebody's house. Looking back, I'm like, how did I not die of hepatitis? Like, I cringe every time I tell this story because I have my boys and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if I find out they did this, I would want to kill them too, which is exactly how my parents reacted. I have a moose tattoo. It's on my hip. And my childhood nickname is Moose. I know there's a whole story behind that. We won't get into the whole thing, but it's small. It's not a huge one. And then I have the biggest regret. I was 18 when I got my next one, and I got it in Florida it was like my senior trip after I graduated, the summer after my graduation. It is the state of Texas. It is the state of Texas with a T cut out in the middle. And so if anybody's listening and you're not from Texas, people always ask me, did you go to Tech? Like, is that from Texas Tech? And I'm like, no, it's not. And I don't ask me about it, please. Like, and you can only see it when I wear my swimsuit. And I typically will wear like I've always been like fan of a high-waisted swimsuit. So thank goodness those are trendy now. I'm just on trend. I'm fashionable, but it is just, the meaning behind it is I was 18 and I made terrible choices. I mean, that's what we're going to call it. It is something because my 7-year-old now asked me, he's like, is that marker? Like, can we wipe that away? And I'm like, oh, baby, I wish it was that easy. But I can't see it. Like, I literally cannot see it. Even like when I'm getting dressed, everything, I can't see it. So I'm like, that's somebody else's problem now. I don't even worry about it because I think it'd be so painful to have it removed at this point that I'm just like, it's fine. It's there and it's not going anywhere. So
Well,
yeah.
you do live in Texas, and
Yes.
there are a lot of people who are very, very proud to be in
Yes.
and of this state. So you probably
Yes.
don't get a lot of questions about it around here.
I fit in. We'll just say that I fit
You
in.
fit in,
But
exactly.
it's funny because like we went to Mexico 2 years ago and I think, oh my gosh, they're not going to ask me where I'm from. They're going to know. And I just live into that stereotype of proud Texan. We'll call it that.
Sure. Well, you are not the first guest to come on and say that they have a tattoo that they regret getting. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing that. Okay, now, do you have a meaningful Bible verse you would like to share?
Yes, I do. It's actually, I was telling Amy, she was like, okay, if you need to go grab it, you can grab it before you start recording. I was like, nope, no need to. I have a whiteboard actually right behind it. If you're listening to this only on the podcast, you can't see, but I'm literally gesturing to the wall that is behind my camera. I have a whiteboard and I actually have a few different verses up there, but the one that I always go back to is Exodus 4:12. And it's Moses and the burning bush, right? He's out in the desert. And the version that I have, and I can't remember which translation it is, but it says, now go, I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you in what to say. And for me specifically, this is the guiding thing that I go back to time and time again, because sometimes I'm like, I don't know what to say. Let's just be honest. In 1,000 episodes, speaking on stages, doing podcast interviews, sometimes I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I could plan till my heart's content, but sometimes you have to pivot and do things and you go with your gut and say, I just have to leave it all on the table and know that I'm sharing the exact message that audience needed to hear. And I don't question it anymore. I used to in the beginning is this right? Did I do this? Did I do that? And now I just say, you know what? just go and speak. I'm going to instruct you in what to say. And that just really helps ground all of my messages and what I have to share.
And Moses didn't know what to say either.
Yeah, exactly.
And to pull that thread a little more, Moses had Aaron to help him along the way.
Yep.
And so if you need an Aaron, you can get Krystal.
Yes.
Krystal can be your Aaron to guide you,
exactly.
to be with you, to support you,
Exactly.
all of that. So to that end, how can people connect with you? And you have a lot of fantastic free content. You also
Yes.
have some other things, including a course. So tell people quickly about what this course is and how they can access it.
Yes, for sure. So the best way to connect with me is by going to my website. Just go to krystalproffitt.com, and it's Krystal with a K, Proffitt with 2 F's, 2 T's. Yes, Proffitt is my last name. We didn't even get into all of that. This is a question I get all the time, but yes, Proffitt is my last name.
Yes, and we'll put that in the show notes.
Yes. But come hang out with me. You can actually get on my weekly newsletter if you want to know more about my podcast, all the different resources that I have. Get on the email list and you'll be updated. And then I have a course. It's called Proffitt Podcasting. I know it sounds a little egotistical, but it's a play on words, right? Because it's profit. We're working towards profit. And I hope that people that are in the community that have taken this program are working towards making money with a podcast, because even though there's a lot of us out here that have been doing this for a while, some of us aren't making millions. There's of course people out there doing it, but at the end of the day, it's all about adding value to your audience and sharing that important message. And this course helps you do it in 30 days or less. And I'm super proud of it. I'm actually about to pass, I think I'm at like 197 students that have gone through the program at this point. So I'm super proud of it. It's actually getting a makeover as we speak. When we're recording this, the new version may actually be live whenever this goes live, but I encourage you to check it out if you've had it on your heart to share an important message and you are looking to start a podcast.
And I know you've been working really hard on that because number one, you've been sharing and you just have such great content. So I definitely highly recommend that. And I will have a link to that in the show notes as well. So please go, or excuse me, well, in the show notes and episode description, which you have taught me the difference between that. But we will have that. And please just go, if nothing else, get on Krystal's email list if you are interested in any kind of content creation. And tune into the Proffitt Podcast. And then you also have something called the PODDY report. You know this. I'm just telling everybody. That's a daily podcast. And so that is 5 minutes ish. And you just get these little bitty nuggets and I like it. And sometimes it's fun because you get little, I like the little snippets into your life. So you get a little more, I don't know, maybe, I don't know what the right word.
Uncensored. Like, I mean, I feel like it is. It's more raw. Someone was telling me like the best description is like, it's kind of like the Instagram stories for a podcast because it's just, it's 5 minutes or less and it's not edited. It is unfiltered. And I mean, Amy can tell you, I had roosters in the background last time I recorded at my parents' house. I mean, like there is nothing like off limits for what will be on this podcast, but I promise you it will be delivered in 5 minutes or less. That is my promise every single time. So yeah, go check that out.
It's great. It's great. Okay. We've covered a lot. I like to have my guests leave the one simple thing they would like my community to remember about our conversation. So I will let you have the final word and share the one simple thing.
Yes, for sure. So, I mean, I know that like Amy said earlier, this topic today may not have been the thing that you expected to hear on this podcast, but I truly believe that you listened to it to this point for a reason. So if you're looking for validation that you're meant to start a content journey or something new in your life, I hope that this encourages you to think about what that can look like and maybe reach out to Amy or myself if you have questions and you want to know what the next steps are. But I want to leave you with something I say to my audience every single week, and that is keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.
Fantastic.